Jamie, thank you very much for coming on the Just Mental show today. We're very excited to have you. Let's jump right in. And why don't you just start by introducing yourself and just telling everybody a little bit about what you do?
My name is Jamie, obviously. I am a mom of six. Two of them are adults, but I have four that I'm homeschooling. And I have been a hospice nurse. I'm also married, but I've been a hospice nurse for 16 years and I've been providing hospice care for 18 years. And so, what I've done over my career, I've been in a lot of different areas. I've done inpatient oncology, outpatient oncology, inpatient hospices, outpatient, like in the community um, hospitals. And I kind of worked my way around to where I really understood hospice as a whole. I've always been interested in this kind of stuff. And so it was just kind of natural for me to follow that path. But um, so over the course of my career in all these different departments and understanding how hospice works together, I mean, we all have the best of intentions to make people comfortable when they're passing away. Um, but now that I take calls after hours, I can feel that when people call in, they're very um, scared, overwhelmed, and even though hospice provides a lot of great services, some of these families are just still feeling like they could really use some more support. And so I decided to create a company and try to work from home and have better balance with my kids and with, doing things my way and how I want to help people, because I love hospice care and I love having helping people, pass away comfortably, repositioned, care for well, and then also to help the families understand this kind of stuff, and as their loved one is passing away, what changes they can expect, and how to help cope with those things, and learning how to let go of that feeling that you want to save them. Of course they do, but sometimes you just have to be realistic in where you are and helping them in the best way that you can. And so that is my purpose of creating Hospice Buddy, which is what I've named it's end of life coaching and support. So it's obviously not covered by Medicare. It would be private pay, but I just want to be there for people in a better way, where I'm not having restrictions on me of I only hear from people once or twice, ever, and you don't really get that personal connection when you're in an organization. Like if you're a case manager, you see the same people frequently, but most of all, what I've been doing, I don't get that personal connection anymore, but I still want to work from home. So I thought this would be a great way where I can really help people the way I know how and what I do best, while also balancing out my work life.
You
That
mentioned
was a long,
saying,
sorry.
oh, it's okay. You mentioned that this was kind of like a natural fit for you and it was something that you were
Yeah.
interested in doing. Can you talk a little bit about, I guess, leading up to getting into your business and then also hospice care? Why hospice?
Yeah. Well, when I got my CNA certificate, I just needed a job, right? And I saw that there was this place and it was really pretty. And I had driven by it a few times. I'm like, that would be a cool place to work. And when I interviewed, she's like, do you know what hospice is? And I was like, I don't know. Like a nursing home, but shorter stays. I had no idea. But as I worked there, I was there for 2 years as a CNA and I loved it. And I saw how the nurses worked together really well. It was a really cohesive team of how they put their all into it and just work together no matter what the situation is to get people comfortable. And that's, the big end goal is they're comfortable and the family's doing okay. So when I saw that kind of teamwork, I decided to go to nursing school and I got my LPN license. And then I left there and I went to do continuous care where it's bedside nursing for 12-hour shifts, just one-on-one. And I did that for a few years, and that was really great too. And then I dabbled in oncology for 8 years, trying to learn more about cancers and watching a lot of people progress through their diseases. As I'm giving them chemo and blood transfusions, I can see that decline on some of them. And then once they left our clinic, I never heard a peep about it again. They just stopped coming. So I like the hospice end of it because you kind of get that other piece for when they go home and how things work in the house once they go home. So I worked oncology during the day and I worked hospice at night. And I've always been a very busy person. And so I just kind of did that for a long time. So I've been in hospice now for 16 years. And I think just that personal connection that you can have with people, and you can educate them as to what's going to happen, how the disease progresses, and how to manage that at home. Or if their loved one is in a facility, just, being an advocate for their loved one and still teaching them what their loved one is going through as they're going through it. So that is what I want to do, is just to be there for somebody in the best way that I can.
Do you feel like the traditional nursing and healthcare system lets people down in that respect?
I do, because many places, whether it's a nursing home or assisted living, hospitals, everywhere, we are usually understaffed, or they've got standards set by, governmental bodies that, this nurse can handle this much stuff, or this position can handle this much stuff. And they only give you a limited time with patients. And, the care that you want to provide is hard to provide because of all the regulations.
Right. How has your mental health been since transitioning? Because obviously death is not an easy thing to confront, let alone deal with on a daily basis. So how do you keep yourself feeling good when that's something that you're looking at every day?
Prayer is a big one, and having faith that this is what I was meant to do, because I was just kind of led down this path. It was, a pretty straight path, and allowing me to gather as much knowledge as I could along the way. So it was a lot of prayer, a lot of support from my husband. Certain deaths hit you a little bit differently, and I hate to say it, but sometimes you just kind of block it out. You don't want to think about it. But there are those patients that will absolutely break your heart.
Do you have
it's
one that comes to mind when you think about that?
I think that I remember every single one of my Lou Gehrig's disease patients throughout my whole career. I remember every single one. That is a rough one. People like really need support when they see their loved one going through changes like that.
For someone who doesn't really know what that is,
Mm-hmm.
can you just kind of briefly touch on that?
Yeah, it's basically a degenerative disease of your whole body. I mean, your legs shut down, your arms shut down. You basically become paralyzed until you can't swallow and can't breathe on your own. It's just a progressive disease, and it's a lot of younger people get it. I wouldn't say young, 40s, 50s. As I've seen quite a few in their 30s and 40s, 50s. There was a lady who was a situation where they have a lot of problems. Obviously, they can't care for themselves if they can't move their arms and legs. I had one guy, I want to say he was 38, and all he had control of was his toe. And so we had a little soft call light for him, and we put it at the bottom of the bed. so he could kick it when he needed us. And it was, intense repositioning and trying to get him in a comfortable position in the bed. When you have limbs that don't have control of themselves, you really have to prop with pillows and make sure people aren't getting bed sores when they can't move themselves. And it's a it's a pretty hard one to, when you have somebody fully paralyzed, but they're mentally completely there and they know what's going on.
How do you manage those expectations with a patient? Say they know, like you said, maybe they know that something's happening and they know
Mm-hmm.
that like that life is coming to an end. How do you, as a facilitator, position that so that it's not so hard?
Yeah, it's hard because every situation is different. And, you know, this particular person, he had two little girls. I don't remember their ages, but they were young, under 12 at least, and was married. And he progressed pretty quickly. And I think, when you're talking to that person that has the disease, you just being honest of what you're seeing and what you're doing all the time, and asking them, uh, having them participate in ways that they can, because we can tell them, look left for yes, and we would ask him a question, and his eyes would dart one way or the other. But really including them in that, and then also the honesty. I feel like a lot of providers in the general community, doctors, like primary doctors, oncologists, they have a hard time admitting when somebody is declining, or they don't want to give up hope, and they will push the chemos and the radiations and the dialysis, and they just don't. Everybody wants to hold on as long as they can, but at some point I think it's the best thing you can do is be honest, and we see people come on to hospice so late. I think the average length of stay for somebody on hospice is like 88 days, if I remember correctly. And you can have hospice for the last 6 months of your life, as long as you're not undergoing current radiation or chemo or curative measures, um, which allows them to get a lot more comfort because they start managing the medications, bring in equipment if needed. And then you also have social workers and chaplains that can work with the families to help them prepare for that stuff. There's a lot of pieces and a lot of people that come together to help with that. So when people sign on early, it really makes a difference in their outcome when they're a little bit more prepared as to what's going on.
I can imagine that dealing with the patient's family at times can be almost harder than dealing with the patient itself, and not in a
Mm-hmm.
physical sense, but in the emotional and mental capacity of being
Yeah.
around people who maybe haven't accepted that a loved one is going to pass.
Mm-hmm.
What, in your opinion, as an expert, having been in the hospice care area for 16 years, what advice can you give to someone who may be going through a similar experience?
Yeah. Um, Talk to somebody who knows end of life well. Whether you call a hospice company and they come and do an evaluation, maybe they're appropriate, maybe they're not, but they could tell you where they're at. Um, and talking with your doctor and trying to get an honest opinion, is all of this pain and suffering from the chemo, blood transfusions, dialysis, is it worth it? Or what am I prolonging, depending on how bad they've been suffering. So I would definitely talk to either a doctor or just call your local hospice or call me, and then we can talk about it. But yeah.
What is the impact of having a family that maybe refuses to accept that end of life is coming?
Yeah, it does happen. And honestly, I get yelled at most days at work. I mean, and over the years I've learned you cannot take it personal. So I don't really care what people end up saying to me on the phone or during those visits. I try not to take it personally because I know that they're hurting and they're probably just lashing out. But I think maybe the newer hospice nurses have a harder time dealing with that. Um, you're not used to getting yelled at like that all the time, but there are people that are difficult, and it really takes some one-on-one time to get them to where you can talk to them and they're not so upset, and try to explain things calmly. Um, and that does make a difference most times if you can just kind of get the situation under control. But there's definitely families there that have an exceptional hard time, which is why I want to do this also. Those ones that are just not accepting it or not seeing it, that they could call me and we can work those things out.
And what kind of things could a person do besides talking to somebody to maybe get in a better place with the reality? Because a lot of people, I think, are in a position where they could potentially be facing this reality that a loved one of theirs is going to eventually pass away, whether that's in the next 6 months or the next year. How can a person prepare for that? Is there a way to prepare for that?
Um, I think most people, when it happens, if it's like a sudden death, people have a much harder time accepting that, even if somebody was 98 years old and was doing okay, but then had a terrible event happen, they fell or whatever, and then they passed, that family really didn't have that time to prepare themselves for that, which is hard. But when somebody is diagnosed with, a long-term progressive kind of condition like an aggressive cancer or lung diseases, heart diseases, things like that, and they start losing their ability to walk or to tolerate life, they can't even get up to go to the bathroom without help. I mean, not eating well, sleeping mostly. Sometimes those can be symptoms of depression for sure, but sometimes it's them showing that their body is just not strong enough and is having a hard time keeping up. So when you have families that are, pushing them to go places or kind of guilt tripping them almost, sometimes people just want to be done and their families are just not accepting that, and they take them to the doctors. And I think it's really about good family communication too. When the sick person can talk to the family members and tell them, this is what I'm feeling. Having good communication within your family is good, but then also recognizing the symptoms that your loved one may be declining.
Obviously, you've been in a lot of rooms over 16 years with a lot of people who are coming to the end of their lives. And I'm sure you've had some interesting conversations with people about what that looks like. What is the resounding, I guess, consensus when you talk to people? Are there any regrets? You hear about it all the time, that people have regrets when they get to the end of their life, things that they didn't do, things that they wish they would have done.
Yeah.
Did you have any of those conversations?
Yeah, I have that conversation a lot. They didn't get to take that trip that they wanted, and things of that nature. And or I should have did this, could have did that. People have those feelings as well, that they should have done more. But I think part of that is just being honest with yourself and where they were and how you were able to support them where they were, even though they couldn't do the things that they wanted to do. But also to let them know that you can't hold that over your own head. It'll drive you crazy if you say the would have, should have, could have. And I think people dwell on that a lot, and that causes more heartache along the way when you think back, what else could I have done, what else could I have done. And the most important thing is you supported them where they were in that moment.
Has there ever been any conversation surrounding, like, for example, you hear people say all the time, well, when I was younger, I wish I would have just done that, or like bigger lifetime regrets?
Not that I can think of offhand. I'm sure there were a few, like, when people's families are kind of disjointed and um, they lose that connection with a certain family member, those things do come into play a lot. Like they wish they would have saw so and so, or patched that thing up. But um, I think a lot of that conversation is just being, as the patient, just accepting, what you did and didn't do, and forgive yourself for the things that you didn't get to do or regretted.
Of course. I think a big thing is that when we know that our time is coming to an end, obviously that raises a lot of questions about what could have been different. Like you said, the what ifs, the should have beens, all of that kind of stuff. And I know that's a fear of mine, that I'm gonna eventually get to the end of my life and think back and say, why didn't I do that? Why didn't I take that trip? And I think it's a good reminder that at the time it might not seem like a good idea, and a lot of the times you look at your life like you have so much time left,
Mhm.
and all those cliches, like you only have one life and all you have is the present moment, have never been more true until you're facing the uncertainty of what lies beyond the life that you're living right now.
Yeah. But, I think everything happens for a reason. I think that we make connections for a reason, and we get to talk to certain people for a reason. So if you didn't get to do that thing, maybe there was a reason, because maybe it wasn't meant to be. It didn't make you who you are today, because all of those hurts and bad choices, it's all a learning experience to get to where you are today. And you know, learning from your mistakes, not going back and doing the things that you regretted, or, if you didn't get to do something, looking at what you did do, and, you know, and looking at it from a different perspective.
How has working in hospice ultimately changed your perspective on the way that you live your life? What impact has it had?
Well, I think I'm a little bit more cautious than most. I don't know if that's something to do with, you know, my ADHD. I don't know, but I'm always scared I'm gonna get hurt. So I always go worst case scenario. So, but I know, my parents are still living. All but one of my grandparents is still living. Um, and I know that those times are going to be hard for me, being on a different side of the bed. But I think you could just, you just have to get through it the best you can, and you can't hold, you can't lay in bed all day. I mean, you have to get up, you have to move, you have to, find a way to get through that. Um, and whether that's like with therapy or talking with somebody, the depression after somebody passes can be real. And, you know, I hope that when I have to go through it, I will handle it as good as I can, as and have somebody, to help me through that as well.
Has working in hospice changed your perspective on death?
Um, yeah, in the beginning, I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know what it looked like to have somebody die right in front of me, to, watch somebody take their last breath, or to walk in a house and find somebody on the floor. You know, anything can happen at any time. And I don't think that you can live with the regrets. You know, you just have to be happy with where you are. And if you aren't happy, what can you do to fix that, to make, if you pass away tomorrow, will you be happy that you accepted who you are and what you've accomplished in your life?
Would you say that you're at a comfortable place with where you're at right now if you were to die tomorrow?
Yeah.
Why is that?
Everything always works out some way. I mean, the world is not going to stop. Everybody needs to get up. They have to keep moving. They have to go on. Yeah, there might be some things for my husband to have to figure out, or, um, you know, of course the kids would be hurting, but I think that with our faith and our values, we would do okay. I mean, I'm ready to go whenever it's my time.
I think that's a very interesting perspective to have because a lot of the times, like, I'll be completely honest, death scares me. The
Mhm.
idea of not knowing what's next scares me. Um, and I think when you're confronted with that idea of the end of life every single day, definitely gives you a unique perspective on the fact that you do only get one life and that
Yeah.
every moment that you do get is very precious and you should treasure that. Do you have any advice for people who are potentially facing a similar situation or just in general, having dealt with death? What advice would you give to a younger person?
Well, I think that, I mean, it's never going to be easy. But if you can find somebody that you trust that will support you, that you can talk to, and who helps motivate you a little bit, um, I think that can be really, really helpful in helping them through that healing process. But also, when I was growing up, um, we didn't really ever talk about religion. Just it wasn't talked about in the house. Um, and then my one of my exes was atheist, and so anytime I ever brought up a faith of any sort or a question about what could be next, or obviously that was a big concern of mine too, which is what basically led me to hospice in the first place. I took death and dying classes, and it was always interesting. I want to know what's next. I read, different religious books just to see what they had to say. I mean, not the whole thing, but I kind of got a grasp on what it was about. And every culture believes in something. I mean, there's a God of some sort. And I always, as I went through this hospice stuff and I've been at the bedside, I have seen some things that I couldn't tell you how they happened, but it makes you wonder, okay, is there something after this? Um, and after all this time now, I'm pretty positive there is something after this. There's more to this life than what we see. And in order to get there, you have to, try to be the best person you can be and have faith that there is something after this and that there is a God that created all this.
I think the nice thing about believing in anything is the peace that it
Mm-hmm.
brings. And that's kind of the message that I'm getting from what you're saying is that
Yeah.
religion and faith brings peace, peace in knowing that you're going to be okay regardless of what happens. And I
Yeah.
think that's just an important reminder that we do just need to find faith. We need to find something to believe in, and in doing so, we will find peace.
Yeah. And I think that's a big part of why, if I were to pass away tomorrow, so be it, because I'm pretty sure that I know where I'm going, you know.
Right, right. For anybody who's listening, where could they find you if they wanted to learn more about what you offer, what you do, any of that stuff?
You can go to www.hospicebuddy.com, or you can find me on Facebook, Hospice as well, Hospice Buddy as well on there. Um, and I've got a lot of blog information about specific things related to end of life, like symptoms. And so when somebody's going through a symptom, it could be really helpful for some of those people if they're going through a certain thing like agitation at end of life. or not eating well at end of life, that they can go there and find that information. And then I also put a store on my website. So over the course of my career, I kind of thought about anything I would need to take care of somebody in a home, whether that's, straps to help move people, pillows, and all sorts of things. I compiled quite the list, and some of those things are not provided by hospice. So, but they are very helpful to have if you have them. So I did make that kind of easy for people to go through and find different supplies that maybe they can't get through their own hospice company.
What is your top piece of advice for anyone who's navigating this journey?
Take it one day at a time, because every day can be different. Somebody can be really sick one day, not feeling well, and the next day have a pretty good day. And sometimes they might sleep more. It's really just one day at a time, and preparing your heart for whatever could happen whenever it could happen, because you just don't know. Nobody has a crystal ball. That's one of the most common questions we get is, when is my time? Or, when is my loved one going to pass? And nobody has that answer. We have things that we look for when people are passing, but nobody knows for sure. So it's really a matter of preparing yourself and taking it one day at a time, and then calling somebody if you need help, whether it's somebody like me who's an end of life coach, or your hospice or your primary doctor, to let them know something's changed.
I think that's very valuable because I actually, not recently, but about a year ago, went through a similar process with my grandpa. And the world of a difference that it makes when you have the proper care team in place to help you, whether it be emotionally, physically, whatever those services look like. It makes a world of a difference in, like you said, just making your heart feel better about, I guess, the heartbreak that's to come.
Yeah, exactly. It's preparing your heart, because it's gonna hurt. Of course it's gonna hurt. We're human and we have emotion, and you have a connection with that person. So it's not meant to be easy, but it will make you stronger when you realize that you can get through it, even though it's hard.
What are the biggest misconceptions, just to touch on some of that stuff, the biggest misconceptions that people have about end of life care? Because I
Um,
know that can be a pretty tricky question.
mhm. A lot of people think you have to be like, I call it like 1 foot out the door. Like, you have to be at death's doorstep, unresponsive, and then they call hospice. And really, you have like 6 months before you get to that point. And it's always hard to determine, how long somebody has, but they have recertification periods too. So if you hit your 6 month mark on hospice, they're going to recertify you. So as long as you show a decline and it's appropriate, of course, but just, yeah, getting on hospice early is is important, so you can actually get some of the benefits from the visits from home health aides to come give people a bath. If you've been bathing your loved one all these years, wouldn't it be nice to have somebody just come in and do that for you and take something off your back? Or having the chaplain come in and praying for you, or the social worker coming in and helping with financial stuff, making sure things are set in place. So it's such an underutilized program. We do have people in there. People do utilize it, but so many people sign on at the last minute, and they really do themselves a disservice by doing that. And a lot of people don't want to admit that they're ready for hospice, which is a big problem. But I think once you see that decline in your loved one, it does not hurt to get, an evaluation.
What can hospice care look like for someone that maybe isn't as familiar with the process of A, getting into hospice, or B, just what that looks like over the period of time that their loved one is there? What could you expect that to look like?
Yeah. So usually, a lot of the patients end up coming from their doctor's office. Their doctor sent a referral, an ER sent a referral, or a hospital. And sometimes families call too and say, I think, it's time for this. But from that point, we have a nurse go out there and talk with them about hospice and do paperwork and go through the admission process. And then they'll have a primary nurse assigned to them, and they get routine visits, whether that's once every 2 weeks or daily. It kind of depends on what their needs are. There's also nursing assistants that, like I said, can come help bathe somebody and just give you a break for a moment, you know, so you can go take care of yourself for, maybe about an hour. Um, and the chaplains and the social workers, nurse practitioners, they all make, routine visits, and the visits get closer together and more frequent as the time draws nearer. Um, but it's really helpful. They also usually have therapies, depending on the hospice, what therapies they have available, but like pet therapy and art therapy and music therapy, um, massage therapies. So depending on what your hospice provides, those can all be really helpful too.
How have you seen, or how has, in your experience, hospice care improved or affected the mental health of the patients that you work with?
I think it definitely helps to improve people's outlook as long as they've had maybe an appropriate amount of time on it. When somebody's almost passing away and they sign up, hospice hasn't had the chance to really work with them and to teach them and educate them as to what's going to happen and what is happening. Um, so I think the length of time somebody's on there, I mean, if they can get on sooner rather than later, they would benefit more from it and be able to heal better.
So the earlier the better
Yeah.
is probably the number one takeaway from what you could gain from a hospice experience.
Hmm. Yeah. And and then what also is nice, if people just can't leave the house anymore, they can't make it to the doctor's office, or every doctor's trip is the biggest hassle to get them in the car into the building, and by the time they get home they're absolutely exhausted or can't get out of the car. When you have those problems, it's nice that if you did sign up for hospice, they're going to come to you. You don't have to go anywhere, and it doesn't matter if your loved one is in a nursing home or in their own home, in a trailer or under a bridge. The hospice team will come to you wherever you are, um, and routinely. So it helps the patient and the family at the same time to kind of cope with all of those changes and prepare them for what's to come.
Having been a hospice, I guess, practitioner, is that what you would call it? A hospice nurse
A nurse, yeah, I've been a nurse.
for 16 years. How do you approach the conversation of death with your own family? Is that a conversation that you have?
Um, I work from home, and so my family does occasionally walk by when I'm on a call, or they're well aware of things, um, issues surrounding death. That goes for all four of my children. They're well aware of what I do, or when I worked at the inpatient facility, they knew I was going to help people who were dying. Um, it's a conversation that we've had and we're comfortable having with the kids, and I think it needs to be had, because once somebody does pass away, if you didn't prepare the child for that, could happen at any time for any of us. It's going to be a lot more traumatic, I think, for them to all of a sudden grandma's not there anymore, where as if they have a decent understanding of bad things happen, and sometimes there's nothing we can do about it. And this person may pass away, and yes, it's going to hurt, but you know, you have somebody there to help support you and get you through that. I think that's just an important thing to have with a lot of kids, because it does happen.
How would you approach, I know you mentioned a few things just there, but how would you approach that conversation if it's not something that your kids were already familiar with? Maybe that first
Yeah,
conversation around death.
yeah. Um, I would say I have always been honest. You know, when my grandpa was in the hospital, I took my kids up to see him. And before we got there, I said, you know, actually, before we even left the house, I had asked them if they wanted to come. They were a little bit older, but I said, you know, Grandpa's really not doing well. Do you want to come see him? And they both did, of course. And so I took them up to the hospital and they spent some time with him and we got some pictures in. Um, and then they didn't really want to go back after that. They did a few times, but I could see that it was, you know, I wasn't going to push the subject if they weren't comfortable with it. Um, but they did pretty well with it, I think. And I think that was just that preparing them. Like, this is something that could happen. Sometimes people want to shield their kids from it. Um, you know, and I hear people say, don't say hospice. You know, you can't say the word in the house because so and so will get upset. But we need to be honest with ourselves. Pretending that it doesn't exist isn't going to help. You know, that's just going to make it hurt more once it does happen.
I think that's a very valuable point, that it is a part of life, unfortunately. And I think a lot of the times we just want to protect our kids from feeling that heartbreak. But at the
Mhm.
end, what is the real impact of them not quite understanding that?
Yeah.
The confusion, the not understanding, all of that stuff
Yeah.
obviously comes with the lack of education around a topic like that, especially something as final as death.
Yeah. And I think, you know, like some of our kids play violent video games. I mean, the older ones will play with my husband on, you know, whatever they play on. And we always made sure they understand, like, if you this is a game. If you shoot somebody in this game, you're going to respawn. You don't get to respawn in life. You're done. So, you know, teaching them about, you know, stranger danger and crossing the streets and looking both ways and doing that kind of stuff. I think you have to approach it where they are developmentally. You know, I'm probably not going to talk to my 4-year-old the same way I talk to my 13-year-old, but you know, I think it's still important to have those topics, you know, or have those conversations about those topics so they are prepared that if somebody dies, they're not coming back, and it's not a pleasant feeling. You know, it is going to hurt.
As a final ending question, as somebody who has now experienced 16 years in the hospice industry, what is something that you didn't expect before you got into this kind of nursing and caretaking that you wish you would have known at the beginning?
Um, you know, I think because I was in so many different departments, it really helped me kind of pull everything together. I saw how the admissions team worked, and I saw how the after hours worked, and I saw how our inpatient units worked. And I really got a good understanding of hospice as a whole by working in those departments. Um, but when I was starting and I was just in the inpatient unit, I didn't understand. I knew what was going on in my little bubble. You know, I knew what was going on within that hospice house and with my patients, but I didn't understand that how the rest of it worked. And I think when you get into this type of nursing or any type of nursing, it's helpful to understand how that department works as a whole and how they're helping people. So when you need a resource, you know who to go to.
Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to speak a bit more on this topic. I know it's a deep one, and I think the information and the insights that you were able to provide are gonna, at the very most, help somebody who may be experiencing or going through a similar experience. So I appreciate you taking the time to do this, and yeah, it's been a pleasure getting to know you and
Thank you.
how you're helping people.
Thank you. That's my goal. I just want to help people, be comfortable and help their families kind of cope with this stuff. Um, I feel throughout my career, I've noticed, people just really need more support. And that's exactly what I'm trying to do.